this video exercise, we're going to just try a very simple diagram. This, as you can see, is a classic kind of level or block diagram, and you'll see many of these used in hundreds of presentation decks for many different situations and obviously different contexts. But what it's going to teach us to do is, well, it's going to give us a little bit more practice about gradient coloring and of course a bit of a revisit to image design in terms of shape, fill, picture and sort of colors as well. So let's get straight to the exercise slide and have a go at putting together this very simple block diagram. Now that you've got to this slide here, you'll notice there's a few icons to the side which we'll introduce later. And of course, there's a little bit of a color scheme just at the top of the slide, just to save a little bit of time in terms of choosing colors. Now, these are very common types of diagrams and pretty straightforward to put together. So let's just go ahead and put our diagram together in terms of the basic blocks first. Now, in order to do this, I'm just going to use very simple rounded rectangles. So if you go to Insert tab and Shapes, I'm just going to select a rounded rectangle. And we're just going to draw it out just like this. There we go, nice and simple. There we go. And since we're already here, we may as well use the colors that we have. So if you click that little color box I have on top of the slide, we'll go to Home tab, Format Painter, and we'll just click on that box. And that will just paint the same colors right there. Now that we've done that, I'm just going to duplicate Control and D this box, and we'll just make that a little bit smaller and maybe pop that off to the side. And this one too off to the side. There we go. And you want them to kind of be even either way around. So from here on in, we're just going to add a few more gradient colors because for those two icons, maybe I want two separate boxes in between. So we're just going to scroll in a little bit. And once again, I'm just going to use a rounded rectangle and I'm just going to place it here. I'm going to use the yellow edit point just to round off the corners just a little bit. And so from here, I'm just going to use a bit of my gradient fill and gradient line coloring. So I'll need to go to my Format Shape box and I'll go to Fill. Now, this gradient fill is going to be pretty simple. So we'll go to Gradient Fill. And of course, this will always retain the settings of our previous effect. And since we just format painted our little color box, these are the colors which we'll see. These are your original colors. Now, first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to ignore type and direction. We'll change those in just a second. But what I do want to do is just remove that third color because I only want two colors here. So I'll just click that red X and I'll move stop 2 of 2 all the way to the right hand side and just make sure stop 1 of 2 is all the way on the left. Now, if you click on stop 1 of 2, we'll just pick color white. And for stop 2 of 2, we'll pick white again, but make sure that's 100% transparent. So now we need to fix the direction and the type. So in this case, I do want the type to be linear, and I want the direction to be linear down, which is on the top row, second one along. So linear down. Now I do find that white is very strong, so I'm going to tone it down a little bit. So going back to stop 1 of 2, I'm just going to increase that transparency quite a lot. So I'm going to have it about maybe 70%. So that's quite a lot. Now, as for the line, I don't want to remove the line, but I do want a gradient fill line. So let me make my way to lines. And here I want a gradient line. So I'll click gradient line. And once again, whatever's there, we're just going to ignore that first because we're going to take away all those colors again until we're just left with 2 stops. So let me just click on that. And again, we have 2 stops. So stop 1 of 2, I'm going to push all the way to the left-hand side, but I am going to make sure it's really white color. So we'll just make sure that's white color. And stop 2 of 2, we will also change it to white, but I'll add 100% transparency on it. Now, it looks to me that the type is okay, and the direction by default looks okay as well. So the type should be linear, and the direction we do want linear down. So I think by default it's already there. Yes, it is. And that's perfectly okay. So we have a slight gradient fill for the coloring of the box and another gradient fill for the line. And I'm happy with that. So now I've got one. I'll just put and duplicate the other one here. There we go. And really, it's all the small little bits that we tend to do, which is lines and things like that. So again, let me just put some arrows inside of there, just so you know how I do these. So if I just go to Insert and Shapes, I'm just going to pick this double arrow here. So I'm just going to pick that double arrow and just connect those two just like that. I'm going to go to line color and make it white. And simply all I'm going to do is go to dashes and I'm going to put a round dot. Now just be aware, as with some of the other exercises, when you select round dot, you don't actually get a round dot, you get a square, unless you actually change the capping type. So let me show you how that's done. First of all, let me change it to round dot and zoom in. And although it's very small, you can see that those are actually squares. In fact, if I make it a little bit thicker, you can see they're actually squares. Let me just reduce that back down to 1 point. So again, there's just squares. Now, if you do want round dots rather than squares, you need to change the capping type. So just make your way to Format Shape, and under the section for lines, because we're under the paint bucket, so under lines, just change the cap type from its default flat to round. And that will change that to dots. So just remember, if you don't want those kind of very hard edges, just change the capping type. There it is. And of course, since I've done one there, maybe I'll just put one here, one here. And so we're just building the basic structure for our diagrams. And I'm just duplicating a couple of these arrows, as it's not really going to be anything per se, meaning to say this is not a IT diagram, it's not a HR or management diagram. It's just giving you the basic workings of these diagrams. Now, I think the diagram looks fine. If we want to, we can put our icons inside of there. We will need to bring these to front, so just bring to front. And we'll put one icon here, and we'll do the same for the other. I'll just bring to front, and that one's done as well. Now, of course, we can add the text above and below in the separate layers, and that's pretty straightforward to do. But what we want to do is we want to show the connection between these different processes for the people. So we've got the system per se, but we need to show it goes to different types of personnel or divisions, etc. So in this case now, we need to add our pictures. So if we go to Insert and go to Pictures from this device, we can kind of pick any picture here. So I'm going to pick this first one, Looking Outwards number 1. So Looking Outwards number 1. I'll just make that bigger so we can see it. Now, before we do any cutting, because ultimately I want this to be a circle, but before we do any cutting, we've got to get the aspect ratios correct to begin with. So we're going to go to Crop, and we're first going to go to Crop to Shape. And we're going to select Oval first, because obviously we want a circle shape. Now, picking an oval won't give you a circle just yet. So what we need to do is go to Crop and Aspect Ratio. Now, putting that into 1:1 aspect ratio will give you that circular shape. Now, obviously what we want for the picture is just the kind of head. We don't need the full body there. So there are two things we can do. We can either just stretch the image or just reduce the crop. So let me reduce the crop. Now, to do this, I'm just going to hold down the Shift key so it locks in the aspect ratio. And I'm just going to take it from one of those crop bars. In this case, I'm going to take this one from the bottom left-hand side. So Shift key is held down, and then I'm just going to crop it just like this. Okay, and if I need to move the image within the crop section, I can easily do that just by moving around. There it is. But I'm happy with what I've got, so I'm just going to click off or click back on the crop icon. So now we have a circle. However, I don't want the background of this image. I want the same color as we have here, and maybe a few other bits of decoration. So first things first, I'm going to make this shape bigger so we can see what we're doing, but we're going to use Remove Background. So we can take away this background and replace it with our own. So I'll go to Remove Background and mark areas to keep just for the hair and of course the jacket and the blouse. There we go. And we don't need to do all of it. As long as it's within the dashed lines of the circle, we should be fine. And I think most of that is there. So I'll just click Keep Changes, and that's great. Okay. Now, once we got this, what do we do next? So all we're going to do from here is really just add that background color. And the easiest way to do it, of course, is just click on our little color that we've already got at the top of the slide and Format Painter and just paint on the picture. Now it won't cover the picture, it will only cover the area of the shape that we have left. And that's a quick way to put in a background. Now, of course, if you want any kind of background color in there, well, you can just change it very quickly like this. And this is how you get those background colors. Very easy to do. Now, we're just going to finish it off a little bit. I am going to put maybe a white outline there. So I'll go to Shape Outline and White. And I'll just make that border a little bit thicker. So maybe I'll put maybe 4 points inside of there. That's basically it. If I'm going to reduce the size, I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and reduce that size just like that. And there is the first personnel or business. If I just bring that arrow to the front, and that's pretty much what we've got here. We'll do one more together, but essentially the way that we would do the rest of these kind of figureheads will be in exactly the same way. So we'll just do one more for our purpose. So we'll go to Insert and go to Pictures from this device and click Student. Now, some people may ask the question, well, can I just use Format Painter straight away? And will it just do exactly everything that we need to do on this picture? Well, let's have a go and see what happens. The answer is, of course, no. So we will still have to make those changes. But let's pick this one first. Go to Home tab, click Format Painter and just click on this one. So this is what we get. So you'll realize it doesn't remove the background and it's not in a circular shape. And obviously it cannot resize the picture because it's very dependent on what that picture may be. So we still have to do a lot of these changes very manually. But nonetheless, let's see what we have. So let's go back to Picture Format and let's head back to Crop. So we'll click on the word crop. We need to go to aspect ratio and do make sure that we have a circle. So we'll pick 1:1. And from here, once again, we just want to focus on the figurehead. So I'll just shrink down the crop. So I'm going to hold my finger down on the Shift key and just place it on one of those crop bars and just sort of shrink it down a bit. And of course, you can do this from other crop angles as well. And you can move that picture around. But I'm happy now we've got the head of this figure. So I'll just click off the slide and that one's done. Now we still need to remove the background here. So on the left-hand side, we'll click Remove Background. Now the only advantage of this, because we used Format Painter a little bit earlier, so the background color will be there once we've removed the background from this image, as you'll see in just a second. Okay, let's make the corrections first. So I'll click Mark Areas to Remove. We'll just put this part back in, put the hair and some of the clothing. And again, as long as it's within this gray area, even if you see me going off here, that's okay. We won't even see this part here, but I just want to make sure we get most of the clothing there. And just a bit more. And I think that's fine. Fantastic. As long as it's in that dashed line circle, we're fine. So I'll click Keep Changes. And as you can see, we already have the background color because of that earlier Format Painter. And there it is. So let me just make that a little bit smaller and we'll pop that on this side here. There we go. And that's really how you can start to build up some of these kind of diagrams. Now, although we haven't completely finished it off, you guys can play around with the different pictures just to see if you can finish off the figureheads. You can put different text in there to complete the diagram. And of course, play around with different effects like shadows and things like this. But this is a pretty straightforward block diagram. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one. It's a fairly easy one to try, but definitely the basic mechanisms are used in a lot of different presentation contexts.